Hi everyone, Tom here. I'd like to talk about the theme of The Boy and the Heron today. Most have said that the film has nothing to do with the book, and that is true. It is nothing like the book. In terms of an adaptation, it seems like they used the book in name only. In this video, however, I want to delve deeper into this part of the film. After I watched the film a couple of times, I began to wonder what exact part in the book Mahito read that made him emotional. If this scene is essentially the only tie to Yoshino Genzaburo's book, How Do You Live, I thought that it might be good to go more in depth. So just to get started, I looked into the storyboard or ekonte of this scene, but the Japanese characters were too obscure to make anything out. I looked into the film comic and I can make out the words. And when I looked into the children's picture book version, there were more words that provided more information. The single word that sticked out was the word geta. You probably have seen what this is. Doing a simple search of the book in Kindle, there were 2 instances where the word came up. Then I keyed on the words surrounding it like san, yappari, notte itara, ushiro ni kiita, and genkan o tobidashi. And you can come to the conclusion that this part he read was where Copper's 3 friends came to visit him. When I first realized that he started crying at this part, I was thinking, what, really? This part wasn't a particular scene that would evoke emotion, so I read back 20 pages and realized what it was. Prior to this scene, Copper, drowned by the feeling of guilt for betraying his friend's trust, is basically full of angst and emotional turmoil. Here are some lines from the book. Copper really began to dislike that person who stood there in the snow and abandoned his friends, even though it was Copper himself. He never dreamed that he could be so cowardly, so weak when it really counted. At the same time, he had become keenly aware that a person's conduct was made up of actions that once done could not be undone, and that was a truly scary thing. Even if nobody else knew what you've done, you yourself knew. And what's more, even if you could somehow forget completely, once you've done a thing, there was no changing that fact. There was absolutely no way afterward to deny yourself that you were that sort of person. And it continued showing more of his inner conflict. But this time, the thought that he had done something that he couldn't undo, no matter how much he regretted it, was hurting him over and over again. Often he would wake suddenly in the middle of the night and lie there, eyes wide open, unable to sleep. For the first time, Copper knew what it was like to examine his own thoughts and actions, carefully and closely. So, Copper conveys his feelings to his uncle, and asks if it might be a good idea to apologize. And this is his uncle's response. What you must do now, before anything else, is first to apologize to Kitami like a man, to convey to your friends how deeply sorry you are feeling, and to do it honestly, without excuses. What happens after that is not for you to think about now. It's a scene that is powerfully impactful. It shows how lucky one is to have some kind of teacher, mentor, or older person to give a young person advice and direction. So afterwards, Copper writes a letter of apology to his friends, and his friends arrive at Copper's house. But the part that made Mahito emotional, I believe, was the conversation Copper had with his mother before he writes his letter of apology. While Copper sits on his bed and his mother knits, the two have a chance to chat. She says to him, "Junichi, when your mother knits, there is something I often think of." He tells her story when she was in high school. She made it a habit of walking up a stone staircase behind a shrine. One day there was an old woman of about 70 years of age walking, ambling up the stairs. She wore geta sandals and it appeared that she was carrying a bundle on her back. Whatever the case, she was huffing and puffing, climbing 2 or 3 steps, resting and then repeating. Copper's mother said that she really wanted to help this grandma by carrying her things, but every time she wanted to ask, she hesitated. This happened 2 or 3 times. Eventually, the old woman reached the top of the stairs, and the grandma wouldn't have imagined that there was a young lady behind her the whole time who really wanted to help. That is the end of the story. A simple story. But for the mother, it was not a simple story, because up to this point of her life, she still remembers that scene acutely. She said that she remembers going back home asking herself, why didn't I run to her side when she stopped? Why didn't I do what I had been thinking inside? I began to feel like I had done a very bad thing. And in this conversation, she goes on, besides, once we had gone to the top of the stairs, my good intentions didn't matter at all. The chance to do what I had felt in my heart probably wasn't going to come a second time. That chance, well dear, that opportunity was gone forever the moment that woman reached the top step, wasn't it? It was really a small thing, but still, I regretted it all the same. Later, no matter how often I thought about it, it was too late to go back and fix it. If you can't go back, a small thing like this is not different in the least from a big irreversible event. She continues to talk about regret and intentions. The word regret has actually come up 9 times in 15 pages. But of course, the theme of the film is not regret. I think the following lines on the next page are really the theme of the film. It's really true, you know. Without the memory of those stone steps, I wouldn't have been able to encourage the good and beautiful things in my own heart to grow, to become what they are now. If I didn't have that memory, I might not have realized for a long time after how each and every event in our lives happens once only and will never be repeated. How we have to work to nurture that which is good and beautiful in our hearts. So I think that what happened on those stone steps was not a loss. I was sorry, but I also learned something essential about how to live. And also, I learned to deeply appreciate the kindness of others. I really believe that it is those stone steps that is the theme. There are stones everywhere in the movie. The stones that he walks on, the stones that are stacked, the stone grave, etc. In Japanese, the way to say rock or stone is ishi. But if you say ishi, it also means intentions or one's will. As a side note, this wordplay can also be found in the word heron or aosagi in Japanese. But sagi can also mean deception or fraud. Maybe Mr. Suzuki was thinking exactly that when he made that cover poster. In the beginning of the film, he's a perfect blue heron, but gradually he reveals his true self, and his name changes to Sagi Otoko, which can be said as Heron Man or Fraud Man. Toshio Suzuki is truly like the heron, in some ways. At least that's how Mr. Miyazaki presents him as. But back to the word ishi. If we look at all the rocks or stones in the film as individual intentions, then the rocks and stones take on a whole new meaning. I believe the reason he was crying is that he felt the pangs of regret for his intentions and actions. Mahito is a sensitive boy, so when he finds out about Natsuko being pregnant not too long after his real mother passes away, naturally he feels a certain type of way. When he hit himself with a rock, his primary intention was not to get attention, but rather it was conducted as a psychological attack on his new mother, and to a certain extent to his insensitive father, who wouldn't notice anyways. It was an act of malice, and it worked. Natsuko was deeply affected, furthering the feeling that she won't be accepted or acknowledged as his new mother. Throughout the first quarter of the film, you see Mahito being standoffish, dismissive, and even critical. He even goes as far as harming himself. If we go to a quote by Copper's mother on having regret, she says, "But Junichi, if that should happen, it would never be to your loss. If you think only of that one thing, you'll never be able to change it. But if your regrets help you to really learn an essential thing about being human, that experience won't have been wasted on you. Your life afterwards, thanks to that, will be better and stronger than it was before. Junichi, that's the only way for a person to become great." This beautiful and heartfelt message from Copper's mother, and in a way a message as an extension of Mahito's mother on how to live, was in stark contrast to the intentions and actions Mahito was taking. By the time Mahito gets to this page, Copper's friends come to see him for the first time in weeks, and it's essentially a happy ending after that. In the film, however, there are no friends. Mahito is alone. I think we all know by now that Hayao Miyazaki would rather not wrap up a movie with a nice big bow, in a Disney kind of way. Instead, he ended the movie in a more Spirited Away style, where something was brought back from the other world. In Spirited Away, it was a purple hairband and a faint memory. For the boy and the heron, Mahito picks up a stone, likely a stone tainted with malice, and puts it in his pocket against the instructions of Himi. Miyazaki in the storyboard makes the comment, "Mahito, kono toki ishi no kakera o hirotta." In the next cut, it says, "Mahito, migi te ni nigitta kakera o ireru rashii." Mahito throughout the film takes many things and does things against instructions like touching the dolls when told not to, or taking the cherry cigarettes from Natsuko's room, or going to the tower to find Natsuko against old Kiriko's will. In other words, he is expressing his own will and intentions. By the last few cuts of the film, before he leaves his room, he takes the stone, or ishi, from his pocket. Miyazaki writes, "Ano ishi no kakera o toridashi, miru." So the story ends with a subtle message and the song Globe by Yonezu Kenshi asking, how do you live? How will you live? And what kind of actions will you take while you're alive? What kind of stones are you holding on to now? How would you stack your stones? What kind of world will you build? At least this is a theme that I thought the movie was trying to convey. Alright, thank you for watching. I appreciate you for subscribing. Please have a wonderful day. Bye.